All right, so we're going to do this one lesson, this final lesson in HTML. I was going to break it up into two lessons, but I figured I might as well just do it in one. So what we're going to talk about now is semantic markup, particularly HTML5 markup. So the latest version of HTML that we use in its iteration is HTML5. There have been versions before. Currently, we use HTML5, and one of the biggest changes that was made in HTML5 markup uh, was the use of semantic markup. And so, what we mean by that, by semantic markup, is markup that structurally it doesn't do anything. Like it's not going to change the way that a web page looks, doesn't add anything. But what it does, it provides information for the developer, and it helps us to understand what's happening when we look at an HTML document. So I say markup that helps the developer understand what is happening on an HTML file. I guess that's the best way I can kind of describe it. You'll see what it is. Um, but that's semantic markup. Everything we've done thus far has been structural markup. Okay, so we've been adding text, we've been adding headers, we looked at images, we looked at links. We've added these things to the page that structurally changes the page. Okay, so it goes from a blank screen or a blank canvas, if you will, and we're providing elements to it that structurally uh, change the way that the document looks. Okay, and so now we're adding semantic markup. We're going to explore that and see how maybe it doesn't change the way that a document looks, but what it does is it gives us as developers more information, is more telling of the code that we have. So another thing we're going to talk about is classes. I don't want to forget that because we want to look at class. Uh, I'll show you what it is and what it means, but we're not going to really get to see class in its power until we get into CSS. Okay, so I have this HTML file right here. You can see I have a bunch of divs. I have an H1 inside of it with the header and another div with the UL LI structure in there. And then I have some more divs with sections inside of the divs and divs and divs and divs upon divs. And this is what it looks like right here. This is basically a template for a website, okay? And I know that because I built this and I just made some changes to it for this lesson. But this is a simple template for a website, okay? So when we look at semantic markup, the elements that we're going to look at. Let's see, we have what's called the header element. We have the main element. We have the footer element. We have what's called an aside. We have a section. We also have one that's called a figure. I didn't put a figure on here, but I can certainly add one. And along with the figure goes a fig caption. Okay. And I think there's a few other ones that are out there, but these are the ones we're going to look at because this is the ones that if you're going into web dev, you probably use these a little more than others. Okay. So the header element essentially represents the header of a page. So if you go to any website, you know you'll have the header, which is all the content that is sitting at the very top. It may contain the name of the website or the company that it represents. It may contain, a navigation bar, logos, search bar, etc. So all that stuff will go inside of the header element. Okay, and that's what we have here. I knew I forgot one. Nav. Nav is a big one. The nav element as well. So let me come back here. So again, now we're talking about the nav. The nav element represents the content that contains the nav bar. So what I'm doing simply here is changing where I have divs. I'm going to replace these divs. Now you can still use divs, okay? but I'm replacing these divs with HTML5 markup so that we can see what's happening here, and it's a little more telling of what, again, this content represents. But the nav element contains the information that represents a nav bar, okay, and that's what we have here. Then inside the nav, we have a UL LI structure with links, okay, and that allows us to navigate from the home page to the about page to the contact page. All right. So the next one is main. Main is where we like to put the main portion of the page, or the main content of the page. And so I have that stored right here. You notice on a lot of websites where the header, as you navigate from page to page on a website, the header content will stay the same. It stays in that same position as you navigate from page to page. And perhaps even like the bottom content, what we call the footer, that would stay the same, consistent from page to page. But all that content in between, as you navigate to a home, to an about, to a products, or etc., all that changes, okay? That is the main section, okay? Or the main content. So there's a element here, main, that represents that that portion of the page. And then we have the section, and the section basically just sections off the content within the main. So what I'm doing is, where I'm seeing div, I'm just replacing it with HTML5 markup. Okay. And so again, the section will just creates different sections, or it represents different portions of the main page. Okay, so it could be, featured products, used products, the clearance rack, whatever. All that stuff is sectioned off within a page. And the last one is, and it's not the last one, but the last one for this exercise here. But the last one is going to be the footer. And so the footer, again, represents the bottom portion, or the footer of the page. Okay, so here what we've done, if you've done this along with me, is we have replaced all of the divs that we've had, and we have put HTML5 markup, substituted it in its place. So now we have a header, we have nav, we have main, we have section, we have footer. Now when we look at the page, clearly it doesn't look any different than what it did before, okay? However, as a developer, when I'm going and looking at this document here, as opposed to what we had before with all of those divs, okay, now we can see what's happening. We see the breakdown, and it doesn't look, as confusing and convoluted with all the divs. One of the issues that developers had before HTML5 markup was an issue that we at the Academy like to call over-divving. And that's where you're just putting divs inside of divs, inside of divs, inside of divs, inside of divs, and so on and so forth, and just having all these divs across the page. Well, for an experienced developer who's been doing it maybe 10, 15, 20 years or so, they may not have an issue with it. But they probably do. That's why they created HTML5 markup, because it helps us visualize so much better. It clears up the page, and it's a lot less confusing. So that's HTML5 markup there. I strongly encourage you, is there for your use. Please use HTML5 markup as much as you can. Okay. The other thing we're going to talk about in this lesson is what we call class. Class is how we can group elements in various ways. And I like to apply class to a lot of different elements. It helps you, particularly when it comes into other languages, like when we get into CSS, or we get into JavaScript, or any other kind of language that you use to handle the HTML. Class is super important. And simply to do class, it's an attribute, and we just give it a class, and we can give it a name. I like to always use the same name for my elements, my HTML5 elements. So header, we get header. Nav, we'll get the class nav. And I'm going to call this nav bar, and there are reasons I don't want to get into yet. And I can, give this one a class list. And I'll give these three li as a class, say list item. And they all go inside of the opening tag as such. Class main, and then these sections, give them the class section, and the footer, I'll give it a class footer, like so. So really, again, what this does is this just helps to group elements. And I can give multiple, I can put an element in multiple classes. For example, here this section, I can give it class section, but I can also, putting a space in between, I can put in a class maybe section 1. And I'll do the same thing here, put this in class section 2, and give this one a class section 3. And I can, go even further. Maybe I'll give this one a space, give it a class odd, give this one a class odd as well. So now, when we look at the sections, we have section 1, odd, section 2, section 3, odd. So they're all in the same class section. They all have their own individual class, section 1, section 2, and section 3. But then I have a section odd, well, class odd, which these two sections, section 1 and section 3, are in. Section 2 is not inside of it. Okay. And where that would come into play, and the usefulness of it, is I can say target inside of I can do some CSS, and I'll target the class. And when I target the class, only the elements that are in that class would make this a little better, so you can probably see a little better if I do that instead. Oh, let me get rid of all that. Change that right there. There we go. So now you can see that the class odd gets the color blue. If you're not in the class odd, guess what? You don't get the color blue. You get left out. But that's what class helps us to do. It helps us to group our elements together. So that way when we get into styling or we do some programming, we can target those particular elements while leaving other ones out. So that's class. The last thing I almost forgot, I wanted to show you the figure element in HTML5. So previously, and I'm going to go inside of this section. So previously, let's say I want to do an image along with some text underneath it. So I would have to make a div and then do an image, and inside of there I would need to say, put some text in here, some text about the image. Okay, I'd have to do something like this. And there you go, there's the image, and there's some text about the image. And then I would need to, maybe size the div and, change the text around and manipulate it in such a ways to create this image with a little caption underneath it. There's some other things that you could do, some old styles or old markup that we could use to do that. So yeah, we get rid of that. So instead what we can do is, instead of using a div, putting the image and the text in the div, we're going to put it in the figure element, like so. So there's a figure, and inside of the figure we have the image, and instead of using a p tag, I'm going to use what's called a fig caption. Use that element instead of the p tag. Okay. And when you look at it, we see there's some simple changes. It's pushed over, so it has been tabbed over a little bit. But this groups the image and the caption together. And obviously, we can do some changes to the image and styling and what have you. But again, this helps us to see what's actually happening instead of just putting everything inside of the div. I don't say abandon divs. Obviously, I don't believe in abandoning divs. Use them as you need to. However, when it comes to uh, doing a web page, and you know that you're going to have on your page, you're going to have a header, you're going to have a nav bar, you have the main portion, sections, a footer. Use HTML5 markup and always, add classes to your elements. Okay, class names should mean something. Uh, you know, the convention when it comes to class names, if you have a class name that has multiple words in it, like say this is the, for example, here I'm going to say this is the main for the home page. I would say main dash home. You put a dash in between, like so, for class names with multiple words in it. Try to get that out. Uh, we can, do a hyphen in between. Um, and that's pretty much it. I Hey, listen, you saw what I wrote down. I mean, I already had presented. Pause the video, go and write that markup up as you saw it, and then make the changes where you see that I make the changes. Okay. And again, this is like a basic structure for a web page. Nothing like super spectacular. I mean, but you got a header, you got a main, you got a footer, you got a nav bar. Practice, practice, practice. I say it all the time. And this is pretty much it with HTML. Okay, so if you can go through these lessons, the previous lessons that I've done, work through them, you can build for yourself a structure for a web page. I mean, that's essentially what this is right here. And there's nothing that we haven't covered uh, that goes inside of it. So that's pretty much it with HTML. Moving forward, I'm going to go into lessons on CSS, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy it. You get to see all the pretty colors, yay! Um, and we'll get to do like a lot of other cool things. Okay, so practice again, practice, practice, practice. Can't say it enough. Thank you all for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. It does not boost my ego at all, but I do want to get this coding out to as many people as possible. So please, 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 if you like, somebody that wants to get into coding, you can share this video. Say, hey, there's this video, this guy, he's not awful to look at all, and he's funny, and a really cool dude. He's got a whole bunch of records in his background, and he loves to talk about coding. Watch his videos; they're cool. I guarantee, and you'll learn a lot as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. See you all in the next lesson. We're going to get into CSS. Peace, power, blessings.